Welcome back to The Issue. I'm Mark Carr with my co-host Corey Judson, and now we're going to talk about Uber. And I thought the best person to get on the show to talk about Uber was somebody who doesn't have anything to do with Uber, and that's Scott Wallace from Burlington Taxi. So thanks for agreeing to come on, Scott.
Well, thanks for having me on, Mark.
You said that this is what you talk about quite a bit these days.
Pretty much 24/7. I go to bed talking about it with my wife, and I wake up in the morning and I get phone calls about it the next day. So right? It's constantly something we talk about.
Yeah. Well, tell us, how has Uber affected your business?
Well, it's affected. It's the same trend everywhere since they started in 2009, I believe, in San Francisco. So every city, you'll find the same thing happens. They start taking some night business away, weekend night business, because a lot of it's some part-time, some full-time, but most of the people start working on the weekend nights, and that's when the busy times are. Yeah. Right. So especially Friday and Saturday nights, they really take a lot of that business away. So they've, on the weekend nights, they take about 35% of our business now. Wow. And during the week, 10% during the weeknights, and very little during the daytime.
Wow.
So, still, at the end of the day, it's about 20% of your business, right away, right? So it's hard to compete against companies that do what they do.
Absolutely. You say like those weekend times, those evening, that's your busy time, right?
That's a busy time.
That's when you make your money.
Yeah, it is. And it's always been historically a problem. The industry's always had a problem fulfilling that Friday and Saturday nights. Right. I mean, to give you an example, at 11 o'clock on a Saturday night, we would do 100 calls an hour. Right. By 2 a.m., we would do 400 calls in an hour. Right. And by 3 a.m., we would do 30 calls in an hour. So we always had this huge spike, that this demand we could never fulfill. Right. It was difficult, right? Yes. So people, would complain, and this is kind of where it all started from. I think is this whole business.
Uber thought they were filling a niche, perhaps, and
I think they thought they were filling a niche. That was part of it, right? And it just snowballed into what it is today.
Right. Okay.
How? But you are regulated by the city or towns, depending on where you are in Halton. Are they regulated at all?
No, they have no regulations. I mean, let me rephrase that. Just recently they've been regulated in some towns like Toronto, cities like Toronto, Ottawa. Quebec is just more or less regulated. They're still arguing that out. Hamilton just the other day just regulated them. They've been around here for about 2.5, 3 years, totally unregulated. So when they move in, they just keep working. Cities tell them you got to stop. Well, we look into your business and figure out a way to
monetize it.
Well, to adapt it to make it work for everyone. Yeah. And they said no. So, right? So City of Toronto at one point a few years ago said, you need to cease and desist, and they said no, we're not going to. So it's always been interesting. They've become the bully in the room. I mean, they've become bigger than governments. So they're now telling the government what they should do. And that's how they're working today.
Well, it's interesting that you should say that, because it is internet based, and another company that's internet based is Netflix. $600 million a year, and they don't pay a dime in taxes.
Well, that's changing now.
Well,
hopefully.
Supposedly. And it's not just a matter of revenue, but for example, you're covered by fully insured and so on.
There's really, it needs to be clear with people. There's there's Uber Black, Uber Taxi, Uber, a whole bunch of different Ubers, all kinds of Uber carpool, whatever. No one's complaining about that. That's fine. It's Uber X is what the problem is. So Uber X is their low-end service. So it's anybody and his brother. I mean, you basically sign up in your pajamas and you're on the road the next day. That's how their business model works. And for us, there's 4 issues that have to be dealt with. Insurance is one of them. They're starting to get a handle on the insurance. For the first 2 years in 3 years in Canada, they had no insurance whatsoever, but they would tell everybody they did, but they never had any. And finally, even though government's saying you got to stop because you have no insurance, they would say, we do, we're covered, and the government would come back, no, you're not, and they would say, yeah, we are, and this debate would go on for 2-3 years. Finally, they made a deal with Intact to try and cover drivers, but they're still not fully covered. So drivers think they're covered, but they're not fully covered. The government's letting them get away with it at this point. That's one of their issues.
And when they aren't covered, that means me riding in the back seat is not covered.
Right. Yeah, what happens is you sign up for Uber today, you have General Insurance Company, and they'll say you should tell your insurance company that you're driving for Uber, because when you
Business insurance as opposed to?
Right, that's right. I pay about $7,000 a year for insurance per car, right? In a taxi business, and these guys are trying to get away with, trying to get away with telling people they have proper insurance, and people believe it. They're relying on naive drivers to go out there and, and put everything at risk. Put their house at risk, put their car at risk. Put everything they own at risk for the sake of Uber. And to make $7, $8 an hour. It's unbelievable to us. But the bigger, there's still bigger issues, and that's obviously a major one, and it's people in the back of the car have to be cautious of that. But the biggest issue really becomes taxes. In Canada, all taxis have to charge HST. So Uber charges no HST. And just like Netflix, they continue to get away with it. They say we're a technology company, it's up to our drivers, but the drivers can't collect it because they don't collect any cash. It's all done by credit card, so the driver has no control of the money. Right?
Well, it's interesting that you should bring that up, because we've got a caller on the line who wants to talk about that specifically. So, caller, are you there? Linda?
Hello.
Hello, Linda.
Hi.
Thanks for placing the call. And your question is what?
My question is, why does Uber not charge HST?
Why doesn't Uber charge HST?
Well, and that's the question we're all asking, right? Uber tries to claim that their drivers are independent contractors, so it's up to them to charge HST. It's a gray area. It's not really, they're not really independent contractors, because Uber controls, whether they can fire and hire them. They control the wage or the amount of money that's charged. So the driver has no control over that. And with taxis, we have to charge HST. We have no choice. So Uber's getting away with playing in a gray area that's everybody knows is not right. Very similar to what Netflix has been doing. Basically coming here and renting movies and making money off taxpayers of Canada, and taking all that money and not putting back into the economy. And that's it's one of the bigger problems that we have. Like 28 cents of every dollar I make goes to paying taxes. So we're at the state now. We've been asking our MPs and our MPPs and the governments, across Canada to say, listen, they have to do something about this. We can't continue to pay taxes and compete. We all talk about a level playing field, and everybody says, oh, you guys are just complaining because you have competition. It's not about competition. We're happy to have the competition, but they've got to pay their fair share of taxes, or we don't. So recently, we've had our accountants and lawyers, everybody looking at it. So now we have to go. Really what's happening here is the government of Canada is telling us that you have to go to a non-tax-paying type business, which is crazy. I mean, I pay millions of dollars in taxes every year, but in order to compete, I have to do what they do.
Because you can't get them to pay taxes.
Right. So we have no choice but to go and say, it's back to the gray economy almost, back in the 70s, right? So it's the same kind of concept. And so they're saying, you can't charge, you have to charge HST, and we're saying, well, you rather have to make them pay, or we're not going to pay. So what's happening now is companies will start going like an Uber, and they'll just say, okay, well, we're going to make up our rates, we're going to have surcharges, we're going to have to do all these different things that Uber does, right? And not pay the taxes, which we've been very open about and saying, that's not right. But for me to start continue to lose business when everyone else is, they're out there paying 28 cents less than I am for every dollar of income. It's crazy.
So, go ahead,
So
Corey.
if I could play devil's advocate here just for a moment here. So I get the fairness piece, right? There's no question. There's a lot of regulation of the taxi industry that drives your costs up, that makes it very difficult to compete with Uber. That's not facing those same costs. At the same time, when you talk to other young people, right? And generally, like they use Uber, they pick up their phone. It's easier. It's maybe a hip, a cool thing. How does the taxi industry adapt and change? If everything else being equal, to compete with that model?
Well, we all have an app.
Okay.
We all have an app that does the same thing. The Uber app is nothing,
exceptional.
They weren't even the first ones to come out with an app like that, right?
Okay.
I mean, it's been tweaked, it's been modified, as technology's gotten better, everything's better.
But here's my point, though.
I could do the same thing with our cars right now.
Okay.
Right? The difference is I got to charge you taxes.
Right.
That's the only difference between me and them.
Right.
But so if your dispatch was in Buffalo,
That's exactly what the game is going to be, right? So now it's going to the cloud. Everything's going to be in the cloud now, right? So the cloud is hosted, and you can go online and you can do why does Uber not pay taxes, and they'll give you the whole shell game, right? Like every corporation does, right? Every corporation does the same. You know, I say does the same thing. Yeah. It's similar, but you know they all have they have a place in Amsterdam. Like their head office is in Amsterdam. Yeah. Right. It's not in the United States. It's in Amsterdam because that's where there's tax havens there. And I'm not an accountant, so I can't tell you how the whole structure works, but I can tell you that's what they do. So they say they're a technology company. We're not a dispatch company, which in our business is it's a little bit crazy. I mean, they do the exact same thing we do. But governments let them get away with it. People love it. And people love the fact that it's convenient and it's great. But we all have the app, right? But it's cheap. And it's cheap for all kinds of reasons, but the main one is that they just don't pay taxes.
Any taxes.
Right. So, and on top of that, you take into account, the other parts of it are, my drivers have to pay, close to about $500 a year in fees to be a taxi driver. So we're losing drivers because, we don't have that peak business anymore. So my part-time drivers are going away. They're not going to Uber because with Uber, whatever they're going to tell you online, they can, we have drivers out there driving for Uber. Yeah. They're making $6, $7 an hour, right, after expenses. Most people don't take that in consideration, right? So there's no, we call it the race to the bottom, and that's where everybody seems to be going now. Going underground and, trying to find bodies in cars.
So, One of the things that I was wondering, are your drivers considered employees or are they independent contractors?
So my drivers, so I'm a bit unique. We've always been very unique. My drivers have always been employees forever. We liked it that way because
that pumps up your costs as
it
well.
Pumps up our costs, which is fine, and that's not what we're debating here. It's not about whether I pay workers' comp and I pay EI and all the other things. That's that's my business model decision, and that's fine. That would increase my cost by upwards of 10%. Yeah. We're really talking about the HST part of this component. We're really talking about, where my driver's employee, so I take off their taxes, every week. We do all that kind of stuff. So CPP again, but that's all going to go away. So and you're not talking when you talk about the cab industry in general. If Uber took all the cab business today, you could talk close to $1 billion in taxes that are going to just leave the country. Taxes that were collected that will no longer be collected, right? And that's a lot of money, right? That's just going to disappear.
So are you looking for action on this because you're licensed municipally, but the big issue, as you say, is federally and I guess provincially as well. What kind of action are you looking for from any level of government?
Well, from the federal and the provincial governments, we're looking for them to start being like every other company in Canada. Pay your fair share, charge HST and pay for it.
How do you get them to pay?
Well, or we just go and say, we're not going to do it, right? We go and play the same game. And that's the only way we can do it, right? What else are we going to do? Now, Netflix, the government moves slow. It's a slow pace. They're going to make their billions before they catch up to them finally. But, all we can do is, stand up and say, hey, you can't keep doing this, which we've been doing for two and a half years now. And now we've said, okay, we're done. Like, we are now going their route. So we have to manipulate, play the gray areas, and we're telling CRA, we're telling everybody, this is what we have to do. You're making me do this.
What they're forcing
because if I can't
to
do that, if I have to pay taxes and they don't have to pay taxes, I could never survive, right? So, and there's other parts to it too. Doug was here earlier talking about transit. So accessibility. Interesting enough, yesterday or last night, Hamilton just passed a bylaw, or is passing a bylaw for Uber, to allow Uber. They give them $20,000 Uber has to pay to not have wheelchair accessibility, so to not be wheelchair accessible.
But if they aren't paying taxes, why would they bother paying a municipal?
Well, the municipalities are licensing them. Like Toronto has, so they pay in Toronto, the numbers are $100,000 a year and 6 cents a trip. And that seems to be the formula people are going with. So depending on the size of your city, I think it's $50,000 a year they're paying in Hamilton. And then $20,000 not to be wheelchair accessible, not to have any wheelchair accessible vehicles. Which, when I looked at it, I was like, it's got to be a joke. I mean, that's a mistake in the printing, right? But it wasn't. That's what they're looking at, which, from a taxi perspective, by law, we have to be accessible.
Right, absolutely.
And Human Rights Act tells everybody they have to be accessible.
Churches and schools and hospitals, everything.
Well, I have a friend that, he develops buildings and things like that. So he says, well, geez, I'll pay the municipality 20 grand not to be accessible. I mean, because he's going to save himself $100,000. Like, it's crazy in this world. But it's amazing that Hamilton is saying, and, of course, the cab companies are up in arms because they're saying, well, hang on a second. I got to pay taxes. I have to put these wheelchair accessibility, and to put that in perspective, I spend out of my pocket about $35,000 a year subsidizing the wheelchair taxis in Burlington. So they don't make money because it takes, you have to load and unload, you have to strap people down, you have to get them in securely. The vehicles are much more expensive. They're $50,000 compared to $10,000 for a medium-sized used car. So, it's an expensive venture. So, but we've always, as being a community company, always said, okay, well, it's part of what we do, and part of giving back to the community was, subsidizing these vehicles. Well, again, we can no longer do these things. And the cab industry is slowly, they're coming off the road, and they'll be returning their licenses in and saying, well, you deal with that municipality. Like, I can't just continue to compete against a non-tax-paying company and then subsidize accessibility, which should be subsidized in some form or fashion. Like, we were happy to do it for, we were operating, paying taxes, and Uber wants to come in here and be UberX and pay taxes. That's fantastic, and put accessible vehicles on the road. That's great, let's do it, right? But that's not, that doesn't fit their business model. Their famous line is, it doesn't fit our business model, which the Parliament in Australia had said. They stood up and they said, well, it doesn't fit my business model either, but I still have to pay taxes. So, that's just the way, and it's amazing they can get away with these things. So, the cab industry is kind of, stepping up a little bit and saying, okay, well, time's up. We've tried. We thought it would be, we thought, the governments would see this happening and understand and do something about it. But everybody's just, people love it. I get it. I get why the kids love it. I get why people use it, I mean, my son has a tutor. And 2 days ago, we were at a tutor, and so we said to the girl, do you need a ride home? She goes, oh, no, I'm calling an Uber. And, of course, my son says, we do here, right? Yeah. She's a young girl. She's, I don't know, 17 or whatever she is. But, I understand it. I understand the technology is convenience, but everybody has it. The cab industry has it.
That convenience translates into no taxes and all the negative things that are going to affect the country and individuals eventually.
Right, and I don't know how much time we have, but the other day I had on our Facebook page, someone wrote, why would anybody take a taxi? Uber's so much cheaper. So we've already responded to all those comments and said, listen, I put the analogy of bar A and bar B. They're across the street from each other on Brand Street. One pays, he follows liquor control rules. He pays corkage fee, which is the fees for booze. He charges HST on his food and his booze, right? And he deals with the fire code, so he only has 100 people, whatever his limit is. Bar B across the street
makes his restaurant accessible.
Makes his restaurant accessible, exactly. Bar B across the street does none of that. Doesn't pay taxes, doesn't follow any liquor codes, doesn't pay corkage fees. Everybody go there. I would go there. Beer's going to be $1.50, right? The other guy's going to be $6. But is that fair? And everybody says, well, you guys just don't like competition. It's not competition. It's unfair competition. Yeah. So if the government wants us to go underground, and that's really what we're doing, we're playing gray areas of independent contractors, which they're really not, and make it be, saying that you've got to be HST. So you sign up tomorrow, you sign up tonight with Uber, and by tomorrow you're an Uber driver. How do you become an independent contractor in 24 hours? How do you become HST, right? Then they say to you, well, we take 25%, so here's your 75 cents. You got to take off the HST. You can't collect it from the customer, so you have to take that off your bottom line as well. Of course, no one does, right?
Scott, I'd be interested to know, what is the impact that's happening to your drivers, right, to your employees, and to the taxi drivers in general, because of Uber?
Yeah, and if you can answer that in about 30 seconds, we'll be all set.
Well, I mean, our drivers are losing income,
Yeah.
right? So we're losing some part-time people that were good people that were in the industry that can't make a living, right? They're struggling. The cab drivers don't make great money anyways, right? So, but they did okay, and now there's people that work for me for 35 years, right? That are now saying, well, I got to find something else to do for the next 10 years of their working year, whatever they have left, because there's just not enough money in it for them. We were slowly losing business to them. Now, don't get me wrong, we still have business and we're doing fine in that sense, but we're just losing. But over time, you lose a little bit of market share as it goes and goes. So,
okay. Well, I appreciate you being here to give us some insight, particularly into the tax ramifications of Uber not paying that tax. So I want to thank you so much for being here.
Thank you, Scott.
And it's interesting, and I'm a little surprised that we didn't have more phone calls. But
absolutely.
we're going to take a break.